Okay, hello everyone. My name is Sarah Lang and I run the Southern Vermont Economy Project at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. This is Knowledge Bites, our webinar series, and this is our 31st session, which is great timing because my 31st birthday is tomorrow. We have with us today Corey Chase from the Vermont Department of Public Service, and he will be talking about the mobile wireless drive test that he's done over the entire state. And then we also have Tim Scoggins of Shaftsbury, who took it upon himself to do every inch of Shaftsbury with this test. And you'll hear more about those in a minute. The goal of this webinar session, or the series, is to provide high-level introduction to tools, resources, and programs related to economic and workforce development. These sessions are recorded, so if you know somebody that wanted to attend today but couldn't, they'll be able to view this back once I post it up on the Knowledge Bites web page. For the structure today, we've got about 20 minutes of presentation and then 10 minutes or so question and answer, and I believe we will get started. So let me just transfer over to Corey, and we'll be on our way.
So hello everyone, this is Corey Chase at the Vermont Department of Public Service, and thank you for joining this webinar. I hope it's interesting and informative. So the state has long had a concern about the lack of cell phone coverage around our rural state, and we've been frustrated in getting information from providers that was relevant. In 2010 and again in 2013, the state paid for a propagation map. A propagation map is something that is based on assumptions. So you assume, you input the information into a model, and you end up with a propagation map where you're projecting it's likely that there's coverage there. Consumers are often frustrated by propagation maps because it shows that there is service or where it isn't, or it shows that there is no service where it actually is. So the FCC recognized that, and it created a project that I'll talk about in a few minutes that resulted in us doing this drive test. So before I get into talking about the drive test, I want to show you this interactive map. So you can see on your screen the splash page that shows you, that talks about what this map is. You can refer back to this. This map is linked on the Department of Public Service website. So this map shows blocks around the state that contain the roads where we drove, and I see that people on the line are from Southern Vermont. So we can look at Shaftsbury, for instance. So in this area, I only drove the main roads, and this map shows the service from various providers along these main roads. On this side, we can show which carrier to view the results for, and here we can see the results. This interactive map shows the coverage that we identified throughout the whole state, and you can zoom in and look at your particular part of the state and see the results for that area. So first I wanted to talk about why we did this map. The FCC has a bunch of has money that they're going to make available for grants to allow providers to seek those grants, not the towns, but the money will be available to service providers like Verizon or AT&T to fund the construction of new towers. And the FCC wanted to make sure that this money goes to only unserved areas. So the FCC asked companies to submit maps, again back to that propagation map problem. They submitted maps saying where they already have coverage. So this map is on the FCC's website. This is a publicly available map, and it shows the blue here on this map shows the areas where no provider has asserted that it's got coverage. So the converse, where it's not blue, there's some provider that asserts it provides coverage there. And to be clear, this isn't just plain old vanilla coverage. This is 5 megabits per second download speed coverage. That's enough to watch an HD streaming. So people look at a map like this, and we all know that Vermont is not served in the way that this map suggests. So we at the state looked at this map and realized that something was wrong. The FCC allowed for states to contest the map, the asserted coverage. They put a very high bar on how you could contest coverage. The rules were somewhat ridiculous. You had to have tests within download speed tests within each 1 kilometer block, multiple tests within each 1 kilometer block, to demonstrate that the service that was allegedly there did not exist. So the way that we did this, I'll show you a picture from that I just happened to see on this news site. This is a set of phones that we had. So the state set up our state IT department set up a server that had a big file on it, and each of these phones is configured to attempt to download that file for 10 seconds and record how much it was able to download over those 10 seconds, and then start over again and keep doing that. It's at 10 seconds and then 10 seconds to refresh the counters, but every 20 seconds it would record the download speed and the location and time. So each of these phones I had in a box and powered from the power in the car, and I drove all the main roads in the state. And each of these phones, during the entire time we were driving, was attempting to download the big file from the server, and would record this download speed. And through that, we were able to gather information about where coverage was available and where it was better and where it was worse. So to come back to the drive test map, I'm going to select the AT&T phone here, and so these 1 kilometer blocks are used to represent on a generalized basis the information that's on the point basis that we'll see in a second. So if you zoom in further, we'll be able to see the individual points where the download speed tests occurred for AT&T. So this download speed test, the download speed was 420.4 megabits per second. And the next one down the road here a little ways was 3 megabits per second. We could turn off AT&T and look to see what Sprint service was, or Verizon. And zooming out, you'll see the 1 kilometer block shows a better representation of the average of all of the points that were recorded within that block. We used the 1 kilometer blocks because that was these 1 kilometer blocks were provided by the FCC. I'm going to go back to the statewide look at this map and go back to, well, here look at AT&T for a second. The pink that we see on this map is from the provider itself. The provider itself submitted to the FCC a map showing where it believes it has data coverage. And you can see that in many cases the AT&T had submitted the pink map shows that it has coverage, but you can see these red blocks show that there is no demonstrated coverage in the area where the company map suggests that it does have coverage. That itself is quite an interesting phenomenon. So let's get back to the FCC challenge process. So remember, I pointed out here that this map shows the blue is where no carrier has service, and where there's no blue, it's an area where some other carrier allegedly provides service there. We challenged the main roads. We drove the main roads and did a challenge for those the areas along the main roads. The results of the challenge are shown here if you click this challenge button. I'm going to turn on the legend. So the blue blocks are areas where our challenge was rejected. And it was rejected because for two reasons. One, it was rejected because there was adequate service in that block, or because the block contained areas that were already eligible for the forthcoming grants. For instance, these blocks over here, you can see these are the pink areas are the areas that are already eligible. But you can see that there's a lot of these blocks that are pink. That means that our challenge was accepted. And as a result of this challenge, these blocks that are pink and red will become eligible for grants from the FCC probably starting next year. I should say that the FCC process has been put on hold because many states, like Vermont, submitted challenges, and there were so many challenges and such a large area was challenged that the FCC has come to question whether the original maps that produced this original map, whether the maps were erroneous, whether the companies failed to submit accurate maps. If that investigation is true, it would be somewhat frustrating to us because we spent so much time doing the challenge, and it's unclear what the FCC will do to, if they'll have us do another road test to challenge the new maps. So all of that is up in the air right now. We have a report on the Department of Public Service website that summarizes this effort, and it provides some summary statistics about the process. Here's the gradation symbology that we used. So red is no service, and green is great service. And here is a summary a chart that shows the results for the different carriers along all of the roads statewide. And you can see that AT&T and Verizon both have a similar number of blocks that have a service better than, that at least have some level of service. So starting with tan, yellow, and green, AT&T and Verizon have a similar number of blocks that have service. But you'll see that Verizon has a much larger number of blocks that have the fastest level of service, whereas AT&T has a larger number of blocks that have the slowest level of service. It's interesting to note that VTEL, a small Vermont company, there is a large number of blocks that they don't have any service in. But these blocks where they do have service tend to be blocks that are unserved by other companies, which is an interesting thing to note. I was also intrigued to see that Sprint and T-Mobile, while a large percentage of the state doesn't have service, T-Mobile especially has a pretty significant number of locations where they have higher speed service than I would have expected. So you can peruse this later if you're interested in looking at this report. And you can look at this interactive map to see the results in your area. And the phones here, these are the phones that we use. The app that we use for testing this service is an app that is an Android app, so it has to be an Android phone. And it's configured to, as I said, download a large file that we have stored on our internet server. I would say that the app is not super user-friendly. However, once you get the hang of it, it worked pretty well for me. But there are a number of little idiosyncrasies that make it somewhat tedious and complicated. And I think that Tim will describe that a little bit more later on. I wanted to say that the state has, at the moment, no immediate plans for additional testing, but we continue to have the phones, and we are continuing to pay for the service and have the server running. And the phones are available to any entity that wants to conduct additional testing beyond those roads that we already tested. So if you live in an area and you see that there are roads that you want to see tested, by all means get in touch and we'll make sure to get you the phones and some instruction on how to use them. I think that pretty much sums up what I wanted to talk about, and I'll answer questions, or we'll perhaps let Sarah pass it on to Tim for a few minutes.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Tim, do you want to take a minute or two to Tim Scoggins is with the Town of Shaftsbury, and he took it upon himself to do that extra testing of the roads that Corey was not able to access, or not able, time-wise, I assume, not be able to get to. And part of this webinar is that call to action. Corey was just saying that this device, the setup that the state was using and that Tim did use, is available to anyone that would want to do some more in-depth testing in their region or town. And so we'll have Tim just take a few minutes and talk a little bit about his experience doing that, and then we can have questions after that.
Okay, this is Tim. Can you hear me?
Yep, sounds great.
Okay. Yeah, this came up at a fortuitous time for us in Shaftsbury. We are in the process of rewriting our town plan, and something among the many things we like to categorize to document in our town plan is things like cell service coverage. And we talked about it ahead of time and had decided that it was too hard a task, and that it would require a lot of work to go around collecting provider maps, and that we probably didn't believe the provider maps if we went to all that trouble. And then we heard about Corey's thing. I talked to Corey, and he indicated he was willing to loan his stuff to us, and so it provided a perfect opportunity, maybe a unique opportunity to document the state of cell coverage in Shaftsbury with hard data, at least at this one point. So I was able to get the phones from him. I have to thank our state representative, David Durfee, who, while the legislative session is in legislation, let me try that again. While the legislature is in session, he is driving back and forth between Montpelier and Shaftsbury every day, so he used one of those opportunities to contact Corey and bring the phones back. And then really it's just about as simple as driving every road in town. Corey indicated that, yeah, the phone's setup is a little complicated maybe, but Corey walked me through it, and it was quite an easy thing to fire it up and then check and make sure that things were collecting data and drive. And so I was able to cover every single road in Shaftsbury, except maybe some of the shorter no outlet roads. But there is there was one or two hitches, I will admit. There was something I'm sure that Corey told me to check that I forgot to check, and one of the carriers didn't record on a couple of the days that I was out driving. And so I'll get to redo those parts. But it's a really clever setup he's got, and if you want to document, what is the state of cell coverage in your area, it's really a unique opportunity. If for no other reason, we're curious about doing it because we want to track the FirstNet build out. You probably heard FirstNet is a nationwide first responders network that is being built by AT&T, and for first responders to be able to fight forest fires by talking on cell phones. And in order to do that, they have to have cell phone coverage everywhere. And AT&T is being paid to build out cell phone coverage. And one of the side benefits of that is supposed to be that when there's not a forest fire, there will be AT&T cell coverage that regular people can use for their regular cell phones. And so by getting this data documented now, we'll be able to have some ground truth later on to see if in fact the coverage does improve for that with that build out. But like I say, it was a good chance for us to add something to our town plan that we were wanting to see, and it's something that everybody in town is anxious to see improved on. I can also mention that one of the other things we did recently at the suggestion of Sarah Lang and the Southern Vermont Economy Project at the last Connectivity Summit was one way to get started on looking at your broadband problem in town is to do a survey and ask people whether or not they have coverage and various questions about their coverage. That's something else we did recently in Shaftsbury. And one of the questions was, what's more important, cell coverage, broadband coverage, or both equally important? And what we heard loud and clear is they're both equally important. We got almost the same number of people who said cell phone was more important as who said internet broadband was more important, and the number that said they were both equally important was twice that percentage. So people are very interested to see this connectivity improve in rural areas, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback to see that the town is doing what it can to try and at least collect data and find out what the problem is.
Tim, you got a question from Jim Tremarky down in Bennington. He's asking, did you find your results consistent with Corey's on the roads that you both surveyed?
We haven't blended those yet. I'm waiting for Corey to blend those results, and what we have done with the results so far is really just plot them on a map and make sure we covered all the roads. So we haven't really got into analyzing our data yet.
Great. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions. Jim, you found the chat function, but Karen, if you have any questions, I can unmute both of you, Karen and Jim. I'm going to do that now just so you can ask via voice as opposed to the chat function. But
thank you, Sarah. If I could just follow up on that same question. Tim, I really appreciate you taking the time and running that all around. Corey, as you go across the state, I imagine under some of your travels, you had to travel the same road multiple times just in order to get around Vermont. In those cases, did you actually see consistent results?
So this is Corey. That's an excellent question. I didn't really analyze that time feature. I often, when I was going back and forth, I would turn off the recording and go faster. When I was doing the testing, I tried to stay under 40 miles an hour because I wanted the points to be closer together. As you go faster, the points get further apart. So that's a long-winded answer, but I guess the answer is no. I haven't analyzed it.
And the reason why I ask it is if I look more specifically in Bennington on your interactive map, and maybe you can just, on the interactive map that you're showing everybody, kind of move over to that area. In particular, the area that, so let's see here, yeah, it's going to be a little bit farther west. In particular, the area that I'm interested in is the big box store area in Bennington, which I think it's below, yeah, so I think you've got it pretty much coming in as green. Is there anybody else on the call that can, let me think about this for a second.
Well, this is AT&T, and this is Verizon.
Yeah, so I have Verizon, and I know, I'm just not quite sure. Okay, it's Northside Drive, so if you just pull it down, pull the map down just a little bit more. No, the other way, I'm sorry. Go, yeah, thank you. There you go, right there, perfect, beautiful. Yeah, so this yellow, yeah, you've got it. All of this, so you see the loop-de-loop of our Welcome Center, right? All that center there. And then just to the left of that Welcome Center, you see this Vermont, what does that say? There should be Northside Drive there somewhere. Going over to 7A, it's 7A is yeah. See, there you go. See the Northside Drive all along in there. At least, I mean, I have Verizon and I have no cell coverage anywhere over in there, and it's coming up as yellow. So what does yellow mean? It means limited, right?
So yellow is somewhere between 256 and 5 megabits. 256 kilobits per second. So, yeah, that's pretty limited.
Okay. Yep. I'm just trying to, reference into my own experience to try to see, because I drive that road all the time. Home Depot is over by there and everything else. And every time I'm in Home Depot, I try to get cell coverage, and for whatever reason, I don't. The supermarket's over in there. That's kind of our, both supermarkets are over in there.
It showed 1 megabit per second coming through here, and you can see there are a couple of places where there are points close together. So this was on 1029 and 1836, 1837. Must have been going through traffic. Oh, this is 1030, so this is a different day. This is, okay, so this was, I actually had to spend the night there. This was going one direction, and at 6:37 p.m. on the 29th, and this is the next day at 9:13 a.m.
Yeah.
And they're both showing about 1 megabit per second, 1.5 megabits per second.
Yeah, so you probably stayed at the Hampton Inn right on that strip there, which is kind of near Hannaford's, the supermarket, near our Home Depot or whatever. But that strip is notoriously bad cell phone coverage, and just from your mapping, you'd kind of give it that kind of a score. You'd give it as
it's not terrific, and it gets lower as you go this way. You can see that it's there's one here that's really bad. So this area gets worse as you go over toward this Hannaford Street.
Yes. No, we have consultants stay at that Hampton Inn all the time, and they yell at us because they don't have cell phone coverage.
Yeah, so there's no service on this Hannaford Street. Yeah, you can see that right here. It's download speed almost nothing.
Yeah, awesome. No, well that it's so amazing because it definitely validates my experience and many others over there. So that's reassuring. That's great. And that you had it in 2 separate days going in both directions on the road, and you showed kind of similar thing, kind of speaks to that consistency. So thank you much for answering my question.
Well, this is a good example, and I'm glad to talk about it for just a second. So I said that the way that the FCC process worked, Verizon sent well, I'm just going to pick on Verizon because we were looking at them, but some carrier sent a message to the FCC saying that this area was covered. And because we conducted enough challenges in this one square kilometer block, we had to conduct enough challenges that we covered most of the area of the block with the tests being far enough apart. So we can click here. So I tested 61% of the area of this block, but I challenged the way that our process worked. We challenged the coverage submitted by the provider here. So this block should become eligible for a grant if a provider wanted to build a new tower to cover this area. We don't know, of course, as I've mentioned, we don't know what the FCC is going to do with this process. They might investigate it, they might revamp the rules, they might make us retest it. But our hope is that this area should become eligible for a grant going forward.
Karen, did you have any questions? Maybe anything specific to Reedsboro?
Well, I don't really have any questions because I already know that Reedsboro has no cell coverage. So it's kind of a no-brainer for us.
Right.
I know Omar is doing something similar, whether he has reached out to you to use your equipment or if he has somebody else's equipment. But I know right now he is working on mapping our own roads and testing, what kind of coverage we have, which is, none. So, we're working in the same direction. Like I said, I don't know whose equipment he is using, but he's currently working on a project similar to this.
Yes, this is Corey. I worked with Omar, and he has completed his testing. And
oh, has he?
Ready to pass the phones on to someone else.
Oh, beautiful. I know we have a meeting coming up. I'm part of the BCC with him, and we just haven't had a chance to touch base about it, so I didn't know where he stood on that. So that's good to know that he has finished it. And I'm sure, his results are pretty telling for our little area here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just flipping through Reedsboro. You can see that there's a hint of a signal from U.S. Cellular. But I wouldn't call that usable.
No, not at all. Which, as far as we're concerned, it's a major concern because we're pretty isolated from everybody. So if we have an issue, we're out of luck. I mean, it raises a huge concern for safety because people tend to get lost around here. So because it is so remote.
Understandable.
And as SVMC starts to build out its consumer-facing virtual platforms and our telemedicine and in-home monitoring, all of that works through the cell phone network. So Reedsboro would, the individuals that we're trying to do remote health monitoring on, if they live in Reedsboro, there's nothing we can do.
Right.
And it's a huge shortcoming. Especially, as you mentioned, because of the drive time distance and the frailty of the community. So just one more question, Corey, and maybe Tim as well, if you're still on the phone, Tim. One of the things that they've talked about with broadband is laying fiber. Is there any thought with regards to skipping fiber and just going directly to 5G, which then leverages satellite and you don't have to lay fiber?
Well, so this is Corey. Go ahead, Tim.
Corey.
So 5G is a very complicated question. First of all, we need to say that wireless service and telecommunications generally, but specifically wireless, is very capital intensive and it's a free market. And so the companies that are interested in deploying 5G are, the big cell phone companies, T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, and they will be seeking to license the spectrum required for 5G and will be seeking to deploy it where they think that the return on their investment is solid. And generally, the spectrum used for 5G is a very high frequency and very low distance, or very short distance, and has almost no ability to cut through obstacles like trees and hills. It's very much a line of sight thing. The result of that is that it's expensive and not really suitable for rural areas. So we don't expect 5G to be a big impact in Vermont.
Great,
yeah, I was
thank
you. The same thing. That what I've read about 5G is that it's kind of like Bluetooth in the sense it's a short-range technology, and it doesn't reach very far from the end of the fiber. That what it is if you've got fiber, like in a big city, you can get and you build out 5G everywhere. You can get really high bandwidth wireless off the end of your fiber. But the problem here is we don't have the fiber.
Well, this was super interesting, and I'm really glad that this is recorded. Again, if there are people that you knew wanted to see this, please let them know they can view it at their convenience. Corey, if you wouldn't mind sending me the links and/or documents that you referenced, and I can put that with the recording of this on the Knowledge Bites webpage, so that it's all in one place. Have another Knowledge Bites coming up on June 11th. We received a grant from the USDA to run a community facilities technical assistance program, we being the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. And so we'll have R.T. Brown, who is running that program, on Knowledge Bites on June 11th to talk about the program and how to get involved or how to apply. So if there are no other questions, we'll end here and hopefully see you next time.
Thank you.
Hey, Corey, this is Tim. If you would hang on just a second, I got a couple of nerd questions for you about VTEL.
Can I call you back in a minute?
Yeah.